I was recently asked how to make glass spacers. You can buy glass spacers, so you can buy them of a certain width. So this one here is quite wide, this one's quite narrow, but they're fixed sizes. You can buy them in raw wood or you can buy them in finished wood. Clearly, if you buy them in raw wood, you're buying them and you can finish them off with whatever colour paint you want to use. Now, they all are a certain width so that they can sit into the lip of a frame. So you don't want them wider than kind of 5 to 6 millimeters. And they're great. They're nice and solid and robust. The nice thing about making your own, though, is that you can make them whatever depth you want. So, for example, you might want to make something really nice and deep. If you're making your own boxes, for example, you might want to make your own. And I quite often frame medals or memorabilia, and so I quite like to make my own spacers, my glass spacers, to my own width. Now, the snag with glass spacers, so here's a slightly narrower one. In this case, I've used foam board and mount board stuck together. And when I started, what I would do I would cut strips of mount board and I'd cut strips of foam board and stick them together and hope that I would get that dimension exactly equal all the way down. Now, on a lighter glass spacer, if they're slightly different in terms of depth, you don't notice it quite so much. These need to match exactly so that on the corner you don't get a little bit of shadow showing through. But if they're darker or different colors, you will very quickly see the little shadows if they're not the same depth. So what we're after with glass spacers, if you're making them yourself, is you really want to be able to ensure that all your spacers, I had a fourth here moments ago, but all your spacers are exactly the same width, so that when you join them up together to hold the glass up, they are in fact equal. What happens sometimes is that you might be a millimeter off, and particularly if you're creating very long spacers. So you'd say, oh, it's nice and easy, Sue, on your mount cutter, all you have to do is set your width to a certain amount and then cut it. But on my keen cut mount cutter, my width only goes to 4 millimeters. I don't have a scale here. So it's quite difficult to come down all the way to the scale. And I'm trying to cut long, very narrow strips, and I want them all to be the same. I need them all to match up because I'm going to put a little 4 millimeter spacer all around the edge, or 5 millimeter spacer. So what I do is, the start point is I take whatever mount board I want. For example, this is my foam board and my mount board stuck on top, and I stick the two together. I stick them together using strips of double-sided tape, and then I do glue and I stick the two together. I always say the double-sided tape is for now, the glue is for later because it'll hold. And then I make sure I cut this first end beautifully square. So I start off by ensuring that my cut for this first side is beautifully square, so that I have a nice clean initial cut, and that is quite deep, so I'm just going to set my blade a little deeper, just a tiny fraction deeper. Now, if you've got a computerized mount cutter, this exercise is very easy because you just run it through the computerized mounter and you've cut all your pieces. Now, you'll see what my problem is. I've got this long piece here. I've got a beautifully flat edge there, but I want to cut 2 mils off, or not 2 mils off. I want to cut a 5 or 6 millimeter dimension. So for this very first cut, because I'm nice and square on the bottom, I'm just going to cut a long line of cut there. So I'm going to lean into the camera and do that long cut. So now I have my first cut and it's all nice and clean. Now, in theory, I should be able to take a pencil and mark them all across, 6, 12, 18, and so on, or 10, 20, whatever the width is that I'm wanting to get. But if I have to keep resetting this, then that could be a problem. So sometimes people say, well, just do it from the other side. You're going to set it to be, you cut the first thing off and you'll set that to be 14 and then 13 and then 12, and you just keep moving your board across and you would get even cuts. But ideally, I don't want to move anything. So what I have done is I've created myself a template. It's just a piece of board, hard board, that is cut, and my template is 155 wide, and I set that in position. So it might be that I want to cut a 10 mil strip. So instead of setting my board to 155, I'm going to set it to 165. Put my template in place. Make sure this is nice and square. That's all square in. And then when I line this up, the remaining piece that is there is 10 millimeters. So I've got a template panel running there, and I've got a strip coming through. Lean through and cut again. And that's my 10 mil one cut. So that's 10 mils. I'm not moving my template. I'm not moving that cut there. I'm just going to slide the board in again and cut again. So the second one will be the same as the first. By not readjusting this, I don't get the minuscule, maybe it's a half a millimeter, maybe it's a millimeter distance. The one snag you can look out for is you don't want this board to slide. So the only other thing is if you're cutting very long ones, you might want to clamp the board in place so that it remains exactly in situ.